time this year, we see a little snow on the infield at Aqueduct. It's a little chilly outside. Things have cleared up, but it's nice and warm here at Aqueduct. It was certainly warm around the country, Richie, where there was some pretty good action, especially down in Florida.
Yeah, I think, when we start talking Derby Trail, it got real serious yesterday, and we saw, I think you and I will agree, maybe our 2-year-old turning 3 that we're excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. So far, we've seen more from California. I'm Andy Serling, joined by Richard Migliore. This is the National Racing Report. It's Sunday, January 25th, when we tape this, and no doubt about it, we've seen more horses run in California, but this was the first loaded day down in Florida. And Upstart, a horse who's a New York bred, actually, and we tend to forget that because he's more than just a good New York bred. He made his debut in the Holy Bull, and he met Frosted. And I don't know about you, Richie, I thought they might be the 2 best 2-year-olds, at least on the East Coast, turning 3.
Well, I agree with that. And Frosted, he was second in the Remsen, albeit maybe the best horse that day, just the track played against him. But I saw a different dimension with him yesterday that I kind of liked. I think it was a good educational race for him. But Upstart was impressive.
He was the star, and we'll head out and take a look at that Holy Bull, as we've already talked about enough. One thing about the Holy Bull, now you knew that Bluegrass Singer was going to go to the lead. I actually think he ran fairly well to finish 3rd in this race because it's his 4th start in just 50-something days. He was stalked by a horse I thought had shot first down, a horse who had beaten Frosted when those horses made their debut. I thought Upstart was a little bit keen, and I was worried this might take a toll on him. It didn't, Richie.
No, it didn't, and you can see, as he gets to the backstretch, you can see he's pulling Jose Ortiz here. He finally kind of acquiesced to his cue when they hit the backstretch, and he let go of the bit and settled nicely. It took him about a 1/4 mile, though, to do it. Usually when horses are fresh, though, Andy, they will tend to be a little keener.
Well, that's what I want to talk to you about. And sitting 5th inside of him, those blue Godolphin silks, that's Frosted, and we'll talk about him momentarily. Do you think, now Upstart's a horse, when they were going shorter, he was coming from well back. He even came from well back in the Champagne. It wasn't a very fast pace. Both you and I felt he was too close to pace and moved too soon, also had a wide trip in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile when he was absolutely no worse than 2nd best. Do you think, though, that distance might be a problem for him, that he'll get keener as they go longer, or he'll learn to settle as they go farther and he matures?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think that Jose had to ask him to run away from the gate yesterday for position,
sure.
So he's not caught too wide. And then it's compounded by the fact that he is fresh. Sometimes he's just a little keener than normal. And eventually, though, he did switch off and wait on Jose to ask him again. I think this is a very intelligent colt, and I like what I see, Andy. And I was talking to Rick Violet. He says he hasn't gotten taller, but he's filled out, and he really did look like a much more impressive physical horse yesterday.
Yeah, now let's talk about Frosted, and we'll get back to Upstart. I didn't like how Frosted looked a little bit green in the stretch, but he was just running second to a horse that he couldn't beat, at least yesterday.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. He was 2nd best yesterday, but I think he learned a lot out of the race. I think being bottled up, because if you go back and look at his other races, he never has really been in that position. He's always either been in the clear,
yeah.
or up a little closer. I like that for him going forward. I also thought when the winner hit the front, he got to looking around a little bit. And I won't say he was green, but I think that was the earliest he's ever hit the front. And I think Upstart actually kind of picked his head up, and then when Jose got at him, he dropped his head and went on. That's why I don't think distance is going to be a problem, because I like the way he ran through the wire yesterday in spite of not having a target.
Okay. I mean, fair enough. Listen, he wasn't beating Upstart. Whether or not he's able to close that gap as he gets some more experience going down the road, it's still only about his 3rd or about his 4th start, I think. So Upstart does have that experience on him as well, and experience in tougher races. And what I like also about Upstart is he's becoming more adaptable. This was not a particularly fast pace. Right. So he put himself in the game, and he was still able to finish with authority, as opposed to just sort of grinding it out. I mean, he's still spurted away. So a lot of horses that close like he does aren't going to be able to do that when they go along. And so far, he's showing no real chinks in his armor.
No, he really isn't. And I actually was speaking with Rick Violet about this as well. To me, the horse that wins the Derby, unless it's a Seattle Slew type who's just faster than everybody else, is generally a horse that can make 2 distinct runs, a run to position and then a run to finish, or a horse that can make a long, sustained run. You go back and watch Upstart's race as a 2-year-old, he's been in positions where he's made long, sustained runs, and I like that. When a horse can keep finding that air, I think that's the kind of Derby horse you want.
Listen, you know that I'm a big fan of this horse. And his 2nd race at Saratoga, I think it was just 9 days after his maiden win. And he ran a sprint race where there was a very good speed that had an easy lead in there and was well in front coming in the stretch. And we all thought Upstart will never catch him in that race. And he came and caught him. And I remember thinking after the race, he didn't win that race because the horse in front tired. He actually came and got him. And there's a big difference. I mean, this is a horse. He was second to Daredevil in the Champagne. It was a modest pace. He made the premature wide move in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in that monster pace that collapsed. He has never come close to running a bad race, and arguably has run as well as anybody in every race he's been in.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And obviously, the California horses have been taking a lot of the headlines.
For good reason.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about American Pharoah, who defeated Texas Red, and then Calculator. But with Upstart, as well as he ran in the Breeders' Cup, shows he not only belongs with them, he might have been best that day.
I agree. He still remains my top Derby horse for whatever that's worth, and I don't think it's worth a whole lot.
I'm with you.
But right now, he's the horse that I want, but we are maybe a little bit East Coast biased as we take a look at the Hutchinson. Now, the Hutchinson's an interesting race when we talk about a maiden race a bit later in the show. Barbados gets it done, Richie, as the heavy favorite over XY Jet. There really wasn't much else going on here except Dom the Bomb, the Hawthorne horse that didn't show up at all. This was a hard-fought effort, not that fast a race, but they're okay.
They're okay. I mean, it was basically a two-horse race. It turned into a match race. XY Jet had things his own way in lead, but he was running legitimate racehorse time. I mean, 45-1, sure. And Barbados didn't let him get away, and they put on a nice show through the stretch. These horses have the look of sprinters. I don't think anybody's looking that these horses are going to stretch out successfully.
Right. I mean, you've got races like the Swale down in Florida, and you've got a race like the Bayshore here on Wood Memorial Day. You've got the great sprint program here in New York with the Bayshore, the Woody Stevens, the Amsterdam, the King's Bishop, the Grade 1 at Saratoga. And these are the kind of horses we'll see in there. And so far, Barbados has done nothing wrong. He is 3 for 3 on the dirt. What's interesting about this race and these races, there were 3 7-furlong races run yesterday at Gulfstream Park. Now, this race, the final time was 1:24:39, just a tick under 1:24:2. The fillies went in the 10th race. They went an hour and a half later, and we're going to take a look at them now in the Forward Gal. This was a very, very different race than the one we've seen earlier. And, Richie, you know me. I just love me a good meltdown.
Well, this was a meltdown, and they did go, the same exact half-mile time. The first fraction was a bit faster, we were talking earlier. I mean, by
hopefully
the moon,
they'll break soon from the gate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
we'll talk about these horses. And what's interesting about it is, and I think this is something that we're talking about as we watch them fool around the gate for way too long here, is that they were going a similar time, as you said, at the half. But at the half in the Hutchinson, they went 45-1, and it's one thing to go 45-1 when, you're sort of cruising along on the front end. It's another thing, I think, Richie, when you have horses that are fighting for the lead.
Well, at least the fraction was faster than the break, and I agree with you. When a horse has pressure, Andy, and they're not loose on the lead like that, and also, this is a bigger field. I think it was a completely different situation where you had 2 horses that basically stood head and shoulders above the others in the Hutchinson. This was a more competitive race, and I think we both agree By the Moon got involved way too early.
She did. She's sitting 6th right now and sitting in a pretty good spot, but Jose Ortiz is actually asking her to run. Well behind him, and you can see that chiclet, the number 4, that's Arad Ortiz on the eventual winner, Bird at the Wire. He was biding his time. And looking at the paper, you had the California Speedball Séjour, who's going to go. You have the horse outside of her, Enchantress from Todd, who's going to go. And as soon as a third horse gets in the fray, that's when you get a potential meltdown. And By the Moon, the Frazette winner, she's already making the lead here. The race is not won at this point.
No, and you're also doing it widest of all.
Right.
So you're running the hardest, widest. You'd have to be a super horse to win from here. And this is coming off a layoff, too.
No, and I don't think she ran that badly, all things considered. I mean, she's almost 2 lengths in front as her coming to the 8th ball. Well, here comes Arad, a Bird at the Wire. And I like a turn back, Richie. And this one was turning back from a 1:16 race, I believe, at Churchill Downs. The second-place finisher turning back from a mile. That was 1 turn at Gulfstream. Bird at the Wire. Dale Romans is in the ball game with a nice horse here.
Yeah, and I think a filly that will go on, too. She's got a pedigree that says she'll go on. My Limit, wasn't that a horse that Alan Jerkins trained?
It sounds like, it has to be. It's a wagon limit dam. It has to be one of those Jerry Shields horses that ran. And Bird at the Wire looks like a nice runner. Now, here's the time we want to point out. 1:24:92, and that was with a very fast pace. So they actually went 0.53, about a half a second slower than the boys did the Hutchinson, with a very good setup. So let's not get carried away with that, and let's all keep that in mind for a maiden race we're going to look at after we look at a couple of turf races they ran down at Gulfstream. The first Gulfstream turf race we ran was the Sweetest Chant, and there were 3 major players on paper, and even though it was a fairly tight finish, they ran 1, 2, 3. I thought this horse, Consumer Credit, who I liked in here, got a very good ride from Zayas, was hanging in the stretch. She kicks it in late, though, Richie.
Yeah, it almost looked like she got lost there for a minute and then reasserted herself. It was a bit odd, but this kid has been riding terrific. I've been keeping an eye on him. He's actually impressed me. And the fact that Chad Brown's given him an opportunity, he must be riding well to catch his attention, because Chad doesn't ride guys unless they can really ride.
Well, you know, he rode this horse at Gulfstream Park West, the old Calder, in his last start, and he gave this horse just as good a ride as you could give a horse. So there's nothing Chad could do. You know, I'm sure his regular guys were saying, I want to ride this stakes horse, but you can't take a guy off after he gave the horse a perfect ride. Well, he gave her another perfect ride. It was strange watching it, because I like this horse. I was rooting for her, but I thought mid-stretch, you know, she's just got no fire. And then right at the end, she just, like, woke up.
You wonder what that is, because it looks like she got there and lost her focus, and then she dropped her head and went on like, oh, I still have work to do. I don't agree with you. I think if Chad wasn't impressed with Zayas, he would have switched. He's a lot like Bobby Franco that way, like even winning.
No, I think he was impressed because of the ride the guy gave him.
Okay,
he gave the horse such a good ride, he couldn't take the guy off.
Understood.
No, he didn't just fall into the wind. He didn't win by a head with a mediocre ride. She won by a lot, but he did everything perfectly. I agree with you. We have no problem taking the horse off. We have another turf stake down there, and this was the Kitten's Joy for the boys, and it was all about Bill Mott in this race. As Bill Mott, who had run 2 horses together, including Dubai Sky, to a dead heat in a prior race, well, Dubai Sky almost dead heated with another Bill Mott horse, Cordier, in the lead. They went fairly slow up front and gave the closers no chance.
Yeah, interesting. You know, the only guy that's comfortable in the house right here is Bill Mott, because he's going to win it with one or the other. And you've got Joel Rosario and Johnny Velasquez slugging it out to the wire on 2 nice horses. And who's third? Javier Castellano. Those are probably your 3 best riders in the country.
And you got Jose Lezcano behind him and Arad Ortiz behind him, followed by Zayas and our friend Rajiv Mirage. It's a pretty good colony down there. They're most of our riders. Dr. No didn't break that well. He stumbled to start. He's had some trips in his races. You're starting to wonder if he's a horse that's going to find some trips. Thought Chrono the Barbarian ran well, considering the pace wasn't that fast. And they went a 1/5 of a second slower than the girls did in the race that we just watched. Now, the race that we've been referring to was the 6th race yesterday at Gulfstream. And this might be the most talked about race of the day in the country, had it not been for Upstart, as a first-time starter, Kozan, a half to the mighty Royal Delta, made her debut for Todd Pletcher and ran faster than the boys did in Hutchison and got a 102 buyer.
And
this is Kozan.
Yeah, looks the part, too.
Wow.
I mean, just even when she hits the front, I mean, she's running through the wire with her. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. He's running with his ears pricked through the wire. I mean, just an absolutely very impressive performance. Now, let's be fair, too. He's got to show that he can overcome some adversity. He was sitting out there in the clear. He obviously has a ton of ability. I want to see what happens when he gets a little kickback in his face, somebody leans on him. That's when you find out. There's a lot of horses that can throw a punch. I want to see a horse be able to take a punch.
No, I absolutely agree with you. It's one thing to be fast, everything goes in your way. And Wisecracker, the first for Godolphin, a homebred from them, I mean, he ran a sensational race to be second here. He was just overshadowed by a monster performance. And keep in mind, this horse put a Band-Aid on what was not a good day for Todd Pletcher. He had no representation in the 2-year-old male stakes. He did not run well with the second choice in the Forward Gal. Earlier in the card, he had 2 sensational maiden winners from Gulfstream Park come back and finish up the track and not hit the Super and Allowance race. So luckily, he ran this good one. But, you know, you talk about good-looking maiden winners coming back and not running well in an Allowance race. So they weren't as good-looking as Kozan. But you're right. They've got to do it when the competition is there.
Absolutely. And where do you think he goes now, Kozan? I mean, if they're going to try to make the classics, he's got to jump into the deep end of the pool immediately.
I mean, are they going to go into a race like the Fountain Youth in his second start? We'll see what they do with him. It'll be interesting because there'll be a lot of pressure and a lot of talk. But one thing we know, Kozan can run. We also know we've got a lot more action on the National Racing Report, as we'll be back, and we'll be back out at Santa Anita in just a few seconds. Well, there was a lot of action down in Florida. There was no snow in Florida, as that is the infield here at Aqueduct. There was also a lot of action out in California, as they had their sort of Cowbreds. They had the Sunshine Millions down in Florida last week. Well, they ran the Cowbred races out in California. And I thought the California Cup Turf Classic, the 9th race there, a nice race, a terrific performance. And this horse that wins at Alert Bay, I thought they did the right thing in not taking him down, as he did not affect the order of finish. And he's now won 5 straight races, Richie, and this is a terrific ride.
Terrific ride. And Tyler Bays, it's good good to see. He's really been on track. He seems to have put some of his personal demons behind him, and he is a good rider. This horse was pulling him into trouble into the second turn. He was looking for room. Horse was stopping on the inside, and yeah, he did take a little bit of advantage, but he didn't just cut right over. He did it. Basically, he let Rafael Bejarano know, I'm going to take the lane, kind of get ready to take care of yourself a little bit.
Yeah, you know, I hear you on that. And I think it looks a lot worse on the pan than it was. You watch the head-on, and it didn't really seem that bad. And I think you're right. I think it was a situation, and it's a tough call. And listen, I'm sure if you were on the horse that stayed a little bit, you might have come back to the room a little bit angry. But ultimately, I think you would have known in your heart you had no horse.
Yeah, no, and again, he
bad
did
timing.
it, but he did it in a very clean way. I mean, he didn't just take his ground. He kind of edged over like, I need that spot. I'm going to give you a stride to kind of ease back, and then I'm going to take it. And yes, he had a steady, and I might have said something if I was riding after this. I wouldn't have claimed foul, though. That's just race riding.
No, I totally agree, and I was glad I wasn't involved at all. I'm glad to see they left this horse up, because while I understand the concept of a foul, it just didn't affect the order of finish. If you feel that Tyler was out of line or the stewards, you talk to him, and then you go from there. But to punish the connections as well as the people who bet the race with an incident that did not affect the order of finish, I don't know who's served by that, and I think the California stewards made the right call here.
You know, absolutely. And, you know, it was reminiscent, that move, of a lot of Jerry Bailey rides when he would be in behind horses and waiting for this horse to die to take that spot. Now, he had to cut it a little fine, but that was definitely a Jerry Bailey-esque move.
You know, Jerry Bailey, he was a pretty good rider. We will go backwards a little bit, and we'll look at the 3-year-olds in the California Cup Derby. I'm going to tell you something, Richie. There were no California Chromes coming out of this race, but we did see a heck of a nice stretch battle when the 1-2 favorite Acceptance had absolutely nothing as the field turned for home.
You can't make any excuse for him whatsoever either. I mean, he was very comfortable, slow pace. Yeah. I mean, really no
Something
excuses.
may have happened. He ran so badly in this race.
Yeah, I agree. And Drayden Van Dyke on the outside looked like he might get his first stakes win as being a newly minted journeyman, but a Hall of Famer inside of him, Kent DeZormo, had something to say about that.
No, Kent's been riding well out in California. He gets it done with Mischief Clem, a horse for Bob Hess that, I got to tell you, after the race, I looked at it again because I had handicapped this race and thought, wow, I could never have had this horse. I was glad I didn't bet the race, but Mischief Clem does get it done in a nice stretch duel. But once again, we saw the good Calbred last year. I don't know. They may take a shot in some of the stake races, but right now, these horses are not as good as the good horses in California.
Yeah, California Chrome was already, you know, some buzz and excitement last year. I'm not feeling it with this horse.
No, and I will see what the connections do with him. We wanted to show a 6.5 furlong race down the hill. This was the Sunshine Millions Filly and Mare Turf Sprint. I know Richie loves one down the hill. I thought Gary Stevens gave a great ride to win this with Go West Marie.
He really did, and the wicked fast pace. And there's so many things that go on in this downhill race because you're coming downhill. You go right-handed first, then back left-handed and over the dirt. And when they go less than 43 to a half, you're going to see somebody with a deep close, and Gary did everything right. And think about driving through rush hour traffic. Now, of course, you need acceleration to get through the spots, but this was as pretty a ride you're going to see down the hill ever.
No, I agree. He took every advantage and got it done. And, you know, it is an advantage, I think, on the hill to have the outside post, but not if you end up out in the 7 or 8 path around the turn into the stretch. And that's what happened to Heat Trap. Thought maybe Victor Espinosa a little overconfident. She didn't really run her race in here, but she did not have a good trip. She got carried out while Gary was cutting the corner.
Well, and that's the thing. The key to that is not committing before you cross the dirt. Now, I know it seems like you're running out of racetrack by that point, but if you commit to the outside before you come past the crossover, they call it, a lot of horses spread there, and you wind up getting shot out to nowhere. You have to stay very disciplined, stay in after everybody kind of explodes, so they scatter like quail, then find your spot, and that's what Gary did.
Yeah, no, that was an exceptional ride. And I think a very good example also of what you're talking about was a ride that Joel Rosario gave Bobby's Kitten when he won the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. He stayed in as long as possible. Now, don't forget, unlike a lot of riders from the East Coast that ride in the Breeders' Cup, he's got a lot of experience in the hill course, and he waited the last moment to go outside, and it obviously made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, well, his turn of foot was scintillating that day, but I do think experience counts on the hill by both rider and horse. A lot of horses lose their confidence running down the hill the first 100 yards because they're picking up so much speed. They actually waste more energy checking themselves. When you get a horse that's used to it, he'll run right through it.
Well, one thing we know, Gary Stevens has a lot of experience. We're going to take another short break, and we're going to come back and we're going to hit some racetracks that we don't normally hit. Had a couple of big races down at Sam Houston on Saturday night. We'll see you in a minute. Well, as we said, We are going to leave the snowy grounds of Aqueduct and some racetracks we don't frequently go to. Now, one track that we will be hitting over the winter, but we haven't had much of a chance to get to, is Oaklawn Park. We did see a couple of races last weekend. They got a terrific race. 13 horses lined up for their American Beauty. The 2-horse at 52 to 1, Richie, that's the horse that I bet in this race. I thought I was the proverbial ginger ale top of the stretch. She hung at a big price, but the winner, Sugar Shock, this is a very nice filly.
Well, in spite of your horse, Have You Gone Away, not getting the money. It was a good selection, and she did get a very good trip, but Sugar Shock was very good as she stormed down the center of the track, off the layoff, Channing Hill. And Channing's been riding at Tampa Bay this winter, and I know he had success. Yeah,
surfing a little bit.
Yeah, I thought it was a bit odd myself, but the weather must agree with him. But he had some success with this filly last year, and this is a nice filly.
No, I totally agree, and I'll tell you a number of things. She's a turn back, but this was a race where, amazingly, the horse who finishes second, Spring included, runs an amazing race. I mean, she was dueling with a bullet in here, and a bullet that actually finished 12th. One horse behind her was eased. So basically, duel with a horse that finished last that was only 9 to 1. She was 20 to 1. So she ran an amazing race in the front end. It's not like this race completely fell apart. And also, the trainer of Sugar Shock, he was 0 for 41 with only 10 hitting the board with horses off of 6-month-plus layoffs over the last 5 years. So it's not a guy who normally has him ready to run. And I think she just won this on pure talent. And I have to think they're looking forward to the Apple Blossom with her. And she has a right to have her name in the division this year.
Well, I agree with you, because I think she won in spite of the distance. And just because she's got class and she's good, but she's better stretching out. She'll be better for the race. You know I'm a big fan of Joe Rocco Jr.'s as a rider. I'm surprised from that post he got so heavily involved with that other horse.
Yeah, I agree, especially when you consider the way the race looked on paper. If you looked at the time form pace projector, the 12, the horse on the outside of her, should have been cleared. He got involved, and I think after the race he was probably saying the same thing to himself. What an idiot. Why did I get involved with that horse? Because she would have won the race if she was able to rate a little bit. But sometimes I think that other horse just brings you in the race a little bit, and maybe that's what happened here.
Yeah.
We will turn our attention to Sam Houston Racetrack, where they had their big night of the winter. The John B. Connolly, an old big favorite down there. When you let... This is not the John B. Connolly. This is actually the Houston Ladies Classic, and that is Cassatt on the front end. Cassatt was the favorite in this race. Somehow she was 6 to 1 morning line. She gets it done. She was able to waltz along on the front end. Larry Jones wins this race again. $400,000 for a lot of horses that took advantage of the big purse.
Boy, $400,000. Larry Jones, good job of managing here. Another Tappet gets the money. I agree with you. You know, if I'm an owner or trainer or rider, I'm thrilled to go down there for $400,000 if you think about the level of competition.
Well, it's interesting. I saw a comment that they're talking about going out to California. There's a grade 2 coming up, with Santa Margarita or whichever race it is. Well, Larry Jones is no fool. He won a grade 1 out there with Joyful Victory after winning this race a couple of years ago, or maybe it was even maybe it was 2 years ago, I think. He probably saw that race that we talked about last week and said the pickings look pretty good out there, and he's going to take a shot out there. I think we are going to be able to see the John B. Connolly. Hopefully we have the John B. Connolly. I missed out on that. Let's go to Tampa instead, and we will look at their turf stake, and that's the Tampa Bay Stakes, and that was run yesterday. This was a nice blanket finish, and our old friend Lochte. I'll tell you something. Marcus Vitale has done a great job getting this horse together and keeping them together.
And I like that the new Lochte seems to be able to do anything. Come from off the pace, where he was more effective last year, up on the pace. Marcus Vitale has done a great job with this horse. Interesting, Paco Lopez, as good a meet as he's having down at Gulfstream, was down here to ride Lochte. And I mean, there were other races, but it was a big day of racing at Gulfstream. I wonder what the thought process was behind that.
Well, there were 2 other stakes at Tampa. I don't know for sure what he was riding in there, and maybe he just didn't have any good business in those races, and he wanted to stay with Lochte. And obviously, what's interesting is, are they going to come back in 2 weeks and run that Gulfstream turf, the Grade 1 race that he won last year? I mean, they have to be thinking about it, and he's proven to be a warrior. It'll be very interesting to see if they run their old-time hockey, coming off a long layoff since Del Mar, almost up to set the field at 24 to 1. And he's a horse that's really sort of run for a long time, and it's nice to see he's still relatively effective.
It looked like he might get there, too, but Lochte really stuck his head out when he felt his presence.
I thought he was going by him. We do have, and I know that you're very glad to hear this, we do have the John B. Connolly, as promised a little bit earlier. And once again, this was a situation of, if you allow the best horse in the race, a 4 to 5 shot, to walk on the front end, it's not easy to beat him, Richie.
No, I mean, Miguel Mena picked up the mount. Javier Castellano couldn't make it down there. He was going to try to get there from Florida. You're on the best horse. You're loping along on the lead. I mean, you got to be laughing to yourself. I mean, it doesn't get any easier than that.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, This is a horse that's just been in great form for Mike Maker, and they just hand the race to him. And it's interesting, it almost felt like that happened a little bit in the Ladies Classic. I just wonder why people aren't a little more aggressive. They're not giving away a lot of big purses down there at Sam Houston, and a lot of guys just seem to just sort of concede the races, big purse or not.
Well, listen, they might have been the best horses,
I agree.
regardless. But is it that they go in with the mindset, well, if I try to beat him, I'm going to cost myself second money, and they're big purses, so I'm going to cost myself a check? Me, I would go all in. I want to try to win.
I know you would go all in. I know that you weren't conceding races to anybody. Well, that does it for this week's show. We saw some nice action. Of course, we saw the big performance was Upstart down in the Holy Bull, but there's a lot more racing to come. I know in a couple of weeks we're going to see some big races down in Florida, some big races out in California. But as always, there's plenty of action here in New York and here all around the country on the National Racing Report. Thanks a lot for watching.